everybody. Can someone online let me know if you can hear us?
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Rosa. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'm just gonna, do you mind if I put it in just so we can see people coming on for a sec?
Yeah, I can stop sharing.
Okay, well, you don't have to. Okay, that's great just for now. We'll just wait till. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I think that's about right. We may have a couple more that trickle in.
Hey.
Hi. Do you see your people? Are they here? Okay, good. Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. It is 12:30, so we're going to start on time. Hi, honey. That's my husband. Glad you're here. So we're so excited, you guys. We're so excited to have this professional event. We've been waiting for Scott. Luckily, he's healthy and back. He had a little minor accident, or maybe it wasn't minor, so minor, but he's here. And so for those of you who were supposed to come a few months ago and we had to cancel, thank you for coming to join us. And thank you so much to Scott and to TJ for joining us and teaching us what we're excited to learn today about accessibility in communication and marketing. So I'm actually going to turn it over, and I'm going to actually, you guys, I'm just going to put it in speaker mode for now. Those of you online, is Julie online, Sharon, do you know?
They're in the waiting room.
Okay, so they're in the waiting room?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So once they're admitted, Stacy's coming. Stacy's here. She planned the event. And Julie's coming, their Main Street staffer. So for those of you online, if you have anything, if you want to put anything in the chat, we can't see it here, but Julie will be monitoring it. So if you have any questions, this is being recorded. You should probably know that already. If you don't mind, let them go through their presentation, Scott and TJ, and at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. Is that cool, everybody? Thumbs up? All right, really excited you're here, and welcome to Scott and TJ. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So thank you again.
All right, can everybody on the phone hear us okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways?
Thumbs up if you can hear, yeah.
Perfect. All righty, well, let's jump into it. So today we are here to talk to you about all things accessibility in the general realm of marketing communications. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we talk about kind of bleeds outside of that. So any questions are welcome outside of marketing communications, but we'll certainly try and focus on that for you today. And before we jump into it, just a quick explainer of who we are. I am Scott Spector. I currently am a senior product manager at a big old semiconductor company called Renesas Electronics. But before that, and I still am, the founder and chief accessibility consultant of my own small accessibility shop, where I help a bunch of companies, nonprofits, Fortune 500s, and even my current company, conform to accessibility requirements. A lot of my work is based around compliance and things like that, but obviously today we're going to talk more on the creative side, on marketing comms and things like that. Thank you.
My name is TJ Gioconda. I work at the Washington Post as a senior designer, writing visual storytelling, operations, a whole host of other things. I used to work with Scott back in the day at Toyota, and we used to have this talk a lot to a lot of our clients, anyone who would really listen, really. So God, I'm really excited to be back here talking about this. Yeah.
Awesome. And first, some ground rules. We're going to try and keep an open format. I know we said maybe we would leave questions at the end, which I definitely would love if we could just keep the larger questions at the end, especially if they're a little off topic. But this session is for you guys, so I want to make sure that it's useful, and it's only going to be useful if you are able to ask the questions and make it relevant for yourself. So feel free to interrupt us, yell, just throw banana at us. All questions must begin with a comment about us. That's very important. And most importantly, I just need to mention this, we're not lawyers, right? Accessibility, I know I mentioned before, compliance, right? So this is our experts' opinions, but definitely don't bring us up in court because we will not come to it. And for the next 58-ish minutes, this is the safest place on earth. Obviously, this building kind of speaks to that as well, right? This is a very safe place. We're all here to learn, we're all here to educate ourselves, so don't worry about saying the wrong thing. This is a group full of empathy, and that will be no exception. So first and foremost, I'm going to bore you a little bit about the science. And this is really just so we can all gain a common vocabulary. When we talk about marketing communications, I just want to make sure we are, I don't want to scare you and say there's, bad things that can happen if you're not, but I just want to prepare you and make sure that you at least have kind of a general understanding so that when you go to Google, you know kind of what to Google for. And really long story short, when we talk about accessibility, we typically refer to the Americans with Disability Act, which is obviously this building is a testament to the ADA. But how does that work on web? How does that work with your digital communication structures? And unfortunately, there's really no playbook for that. There's no recipe that says in the ADA, your websites must do this. So our job as digital creators is to find a way to adapt ADA to the digital space. And it's not an easy task. So a lot of what we're here today is going to be kind of talking about exactly how that works. In a very high level overview about how compliance works with the digital realm, we talk about it in terms of something called WCAG or WCAG or WCAG or WCAG, or however you want to pronounce it. You're wrong, however you say it. But that's kind of the compliance level. You have A, which is a very basic best practices. AA, which is the gold standard. If you're an accessible website, you're accessible comms. You say you're WCAG AA compliant. And then AAA compliant are very purpose-driven compliance measure. That's really just for say Main Street was a strictly a blind catered mostly to blind residents and things like that. That would be a really good reason to focus on AAA compliance. It's very purpose-driven, and you kind of change the rule book a little bit. But again, what we really want to focus on is just the AA compliance there. And just a really quick blurb, if you're in the government space, which the people I met so far I don't believe are, so I'll just breeze through this one, but the terms WCAG and 508 compliance are generally synonymous. So again, just building that vocabulary. When you hear WCAG, or sorry, if you hear section 508 in your head, just think, oh right, they mean WCAG compliance. All right, now getting to the more fun stuff, right? So when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about inclusive design, we're talking about art communications. It's easy to kind of forget that when you're building some, even just writing an email, you're trying to figure out the right colors to use. There's so many other things that play into that, right? There's auditory things you need to consider. There's cognitive, there's physical, there's visual, and they all live on that spectrum, right? There's very mild cognitive disabilities like ADD and ADHD, which of course can be more severe. And there's some very severe ones, things like dementia or something, after a terrible accident where you might have a TBI, it's a traumatic brain injury. So again, consider that there's 4 different things typically you want to pay attention to, and also consider you have a massive spectrum to kind of deal with. So be as precise as you can, but also realize that you just you need to do the best to kind of get these as you can. And this is actually an example I'm going to speak to, but TJ actually told me about once upon a time. And I believe I actually gave this example last time I was here, but what we're doing today is, again, focusing on the title of the session is universal design. We are not trying to make things worse just to make them accessible, right? That's a common trope when you enter a design room. People say, in order to make it accessible, we're going to have to dull it down a little bit. That's absolutely not the case, right? What we're trying to do here is make something that's just better for everybody, regardless if it's for people with disabilities or not. So, favorite example here, imagine you're walking to your front door, arms full of groceries, and in front of you is a doorknob. Imagine trying to kick open your door with arms full of groceries. You can't really do it, right? That's all, you have to somehow finagle it, drop all the eggs, you get inside, partner yells at you, it's a whole thing. Now, same scenario, you have a door handle in front of you, which is the one on the right-hand side there with a check mark next to it. Easily, armful of groceries, you kick it open, you're inside. Now, this is actually, I love this example because it's a physical way of showing how the ADA caters to everybody. And so in 1990, when the ADA came out, they actually outlawed the doorknobs, the rounded ones. So you'll never walk into a new building and see doorknobs. So this is a way that accessible design is just better for everybody. I think everyone in this room can agree a door handle is just a better design. So again, when we talk about universal design, which is something the Main Street Group does incredibly well, we're not talking about doing something that's just very focused. We're talking about something that's better for everybody. And of course, for all my marketing communications friends on this call, we always, at the end of the day, we are purpose-driven. Everything you do has some value, right? There's nothing that's meaningless that you put out. So just as a quick nod from the business angle, really quick slide here. Just 1 out of every 4 people in the United States, actually these numbers are a little old, so these numbers are actually a little lower than they should be. But 1 out of every 4 people identify with at least one or more disabilities. That's roughly 61.5 million people in the United States. And not to mention adults 65 and older, that's roughly 42% of them identify with one or more disability. And the big number there at the bottom, this is a $490 billion market, right? So when you're creating your marketing communication material, you're creating something that's designed. When it's not accessible, you are inherently saying to your boss, we don't care about $490 billion that we could possibly be, right? So it's kind of a big flashy slide, but I like to kind of mention it before jumping into things. And again, I'm actually going to slip through that slide because I just kind of mentioned it. So again, while we're here today, I'm about to hand it off to TJ. He's going to walk you through some examples, but I just want to kind of refocus on the mission. We're putting the user first, right? We're not talking about compliance today. We're not talking about legal experience design. It's called human experience design, right? So just need to focus on that as we go. And again, when you talk about disability, the current modern model is kind of interesting, right? It's just your impairment plus your environment equals a disability, right? So if you can control your environment, then you have the ability to kind of negate the need to account for all that. So you are in control, and you ultimately have the power to be accessible and inclusive. Oh, I'm sorry, I think that was. Yeah, so and real quick, and then this one is just to help you all in your brains kind of identify your own audiences, right? So really quick empathy exercises to kind of show you how people navigate the web. So for those of us that do not have identify with one or more disabilities, I want to show just a couple of quick examples about how people with disabilities tend to navigate the internet. And this is a good example of, on the left, everyone's, who's driven understands what having a dirty mirror and how much of a pain that can sometimes be, right? It's hard to see the car behind you. I mean, it's kind of hard to see anything when you're parking. But this is a real reality that folks with cataracts have, right? This is how their whole world looks. So when next time you're looking through your mirror, think about how you can potentially design something better for someone who might have limited disability in that regard. And this is just an exercise I challenge you to do on your own time, but open up your own favorite website, take your mouse out of the equation, and just use your tab key to navigate around that website. You are going to be shocked about how difficult or impossible it is. Now, 98% of the web, you cannot do that. And it's kind of wild. 98% of the web is actually just a big black hole to people with disabilities. And this is really on the more mild side of that spectrum, right? If you can't use alternative means to navigate the website, it's a really big deal. So do that when you get home. It is fun. It's also very sad. I'm actually going to just scroll through a little bit more of these. I just want to keep the time moving here. But in this one, I thought was really important to share with you all. So dyslexia is obviously one of the disabilities where our knowledge of the disability is growing exponentially day by day. And people are identifying with it more because that research is coming out and kind of telling them, like, oh, this is why I've had issues reading things in the past. For those of you, just the basics who aren't familiar with it, the basics here are kind of what I have on this slide here. There's a lot of letter reversals, word reversals, inversions, and transpositions. So it's really hard to kind of account for all this. But I want to show you an example with some of dyslexia, kind of how they perceive your content. So I'm going to give you all a minute here to try and read the text. Try and read the text on the left, which has been modified to look like what someone with disabilities and with dyslexia, how they would read it. And then in about 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to try and answer the questions on the right based on what you just learned from the left there. Alrighty, does anybody know why our image is good for accessibility based on what they've read?
Increased comprehension.
And who would be negatively impacted by a text-only site? So as you can see, the whole point here is how long this can sometimes take, right, to parse through if you are someone who suffers from dyslexia. Again, either whether it be mild or severe. So, and there's all different ways to kind of combat that. Maybe TJ, I don't know if you have thoughts there, but there's more accessible fonts you can use, right? If you're using Comic Sans, TJ and I are going to yell at you. If you're using very dense font, right, it makes it even more difficult some dyslexia to kind of understand it.
All caps. It's a fun one of communicators like to use. They like to put things in all caps.
Right.
And it's a very easy way to make things much harder for people.
Can you call my mom and tell her not to do that?
Stop texting me all caps, Mom.
It's like you're shouting.
So real quick, on the right-hand side, you can see the translated text. And again, kind of what we've already been saying. Make sure you have clear, non-confusing navigation whether that be in your text chunking itself, or if it's on a website, obviously more clearly your navigation at the top. Pardon me. Excuse me. In chunking, of course, as you're writing your emails, if you're writing newsletters, there's a lot of, obviously, economies of scale of chunking out your text, right? You can focus people on more things, just like, if you're in a grocery store, they put the high ROI items right in front of your face instead of on the higher or the lower shelves, right? Same thing, make sure you're chunking your content very specifically and intentionally. Printable versions, this is huge. In all of my user research, one of the things I hear the most from people with visual impairments or even cognitive impairments, they print out the web. When they want to read a website, they print it out in 400 times font so they can read it, right? So your test and the challenge to you all as marketing comms people is to print it out. Can I read it? If I expand it to 400 times zoom, is it still legible? I bet you a lot of times it's not. You kind of have to go back and forth. It's not the most fun exercise, but it is very meaningful. And now I'm going to pass over to TJ to kind of talk through how this kind of looks in practice. Again, TJ definitely has the most experience out of us two about how exactly this goes into practice in your marcom world. So feel free to litter him with all the questions.
All right, so here are some examples. And I just want to preface that this is very visually based examples. If you're working on the digital space, there's a whole back end of accessibility that is really important. But for right now, we're going to this is just the visual nature of it. So on the left or the right, which one do you think is more accessible and why? Does anyone want to venture a guess?
Go away, Stacy.
Yeah, I got Stace. Left. You see that, guys?
Yeah.
Case is left. Yeah. Anybody else? Throw it in the chat or anybody live.
Great, yeah, so left is better, and the reason left is better is because it does the things that Scott was just talking about. Chunking, you're able to easily kind of get to the area you want, and this goes back to the doorknob example. This is better for everyone. This isn't better for people with disabilities or people, whatever your ability is, this is easier to read because I can get to the information I know. I know that certain headlines are sub to what we call the H1 or H2, so that there's the main headline and then the secondary headlines, and you can see that that one in the middle is related to the one above, but still an important thing to look at. Another one, which this one might be, if you wanted to guess in the chat, go ahead.
Here, on to the left.
Great, left. And this is taking things out of a paragraph content. Not everyone needs to read 6 paragraphs of all the dates and information. Sometimes less is more. Keeping your verbiage punchy and quick, realizing that people don't want to spend that much time reading your wonderfully composed paragraph. They just kind of want to know the date, the numbers, and information. And so when you can use those kind of bulleted lists and those list formats, those can be very helpful to just kind of cut through a lot of the other pitfalls you might run into.
As a quick note there also, and this is something that's very much behind the curtain a bit. So imagine you're on a website, and a lot of people with especially visual impairments, they'll use something called a screen reader with a software called JAWS or NVDA, and to kind of basically parse through the page. It's got a speak and spell voice, very robotic, and it kind of takes you down. But one of the benefits of a table is it's one of the most accessible content mechanisms on your website. So because it's easy, right? It implies hierarchy. And there's some code that we put on the website that will structure the table and will tell the person, hey, this is your heading. This is your first row, first item. This is your second row, second item. And it really helps that structure in their brain, helps them comprehend that. So like TJ was saying, if there's really important stuff you want someone to comprehend, imagine, again, you are the user who can't see the text and that you want to organize a little better. So tables are really powerful. They're really simple for your web teams to work up. And things like Word and PowerPoint can do them accessible out of the box. There's nothing you need to do extra to them. So just something to think about from the programmatic side.
All right.
Did you see somebody in the chat? I assume it is problematic to.
I think it said, is it problematic to put table content in an image?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Anytime you put words as an image, they're inherently unaccessible. In the nature that I can see them, but I can't interact with them, I can't tab to them. That's where alt text and other things can be beneficial, but you really should avoid putting stuff that can just be regular markup on your website if you're talking a digital thing as a picture. I know it's really easy, and sometimes technologically that's an issue. Even at the post, we're struggling with that. Our app takes pictures from our main website, which we know are unaccessible, so we're trying to fix that. So those are some examples, and so there are some realities to that, but if you can, write it out as actual markup, HTML, CSS, and not a picture of a graph.
Right. And the only other thing I'd add on that is if you do that, you're basically losing the value of that on your website, right? Every piece of real estate on your website or your newsletter has value. It has money value. It has intrinsic value. And if you're putting text on an image, it can't be crawled by something like Google, right? So that reduces your SEO visibility. And again, I'm trying not to go too deep into the programmatic, development side of it, but it's something to be aware of. So if you're just putting in an image, no one knows it's there except for people that can see extremely well.
Oftentimes it's a thing that's talked about for the advocacy for accessible in design, or in digital design, is that a lot of the other benefits that aren't even accessible related are SEO related. Because all of these things are bubbling up that information and organizing it so that other people, this is again, feeds back to that it's not about an ability or an inability, it's about ability for everyone and understanding everything that's true, that's good, accessible.
I don't know if you talked about that.
No, the left one is right. It's better because it's a punchier copy. We're not being too verbose. We're also being clear. The headline says accessibility. The other one is giving it clear. So it's not just in the visual presentation of it. It's literally, I have content people I work with all the time that will hammer home points of like, your title is accessibility. I have absolutely no clue what that could mean, but now on the left, I know exactly what that paragraph means. And so I think that can really help. Plus, another light thing is the image on the left is thoughtfully picked to relate to the content, and the one on the right is just kind of like cliched. I would harshly say silly, because it has nothing to do. I mean, it's painting this really weird picture, so that's why that picture is there.
It's all caps.
And that's part of the issue. This is that you perpetuate some of the way people think by what they see with matching the words, right?
Right.
And that's probably not accessible wherever that person is, right? And just because they're in a wheelchair doesn't mean anything about accessibility.
And also wheelchairs tend to be like the universal sign for accessibility,
Right,
and we don't
right.
know that there's a full gamut of things we talk about.
Stacy says sometimes less is more.
That's true.
Sometimes less is more.
That's very true.
People, and it's one of the most powerful things, someone actually said this to me recently, people are there to browse your website right there. They're not there to jump in and really soak everything and read every syllable you put on there. They're there to browse. They're there to surf your website. They're not going to be jumping into content like you want them to. We understand that you put a lot on those 3 sentences, but no one really cares, unfortunately.
All right, so yeah. It's like, what's this slide? Oh yeah. So again, here's an example. Which one do you think is more accessible? Which one's easier to come across, and why?
Left.
So yes, left.
Left is killing.
You can see that I really don't like the left side.
Because left-handed people
We'll
are
say
at
that the right
state
side
of
is
mind.
too easy because it's right. Right. So abbreviations are awful. So you don't want to use them. So taking aside from the journalism, if you write, if it's on the site and you wrote web content accessibility guidelines, you can then use an abbreviation. But there needs to be some setup for it. And when possible, don't use them at all, because it's just limiting understanding. You know, we've all met the person who's in like high technical job, or if you have military friends, they'll talk to you in alphabet soup, and they even make fun of it themselves and how like they don't even know. And so it's very important for you to, I know you're trying to save space, and we just got over talking about being very punchy, but this is one of the areas where it's easy to feel you're being clear.
And we call this inside baseball, right? Just because you understand it and you think your primary audience might, nobody else will. So just make sure you're out for that as much as you can.
Fun interactive one. I won't ask the question again because again it's the left side. You can see here that the real difference is there are 2 main differences, and if you can spot what the 2 differences are, you get a gold star. Because the easy one you really see visually is that you know where the links are. You kind of already probably have been cultured up to understand that blue underline means link. But the other one in here is that the links that are on the right are vague. And you have to take in consideration how people are using the web. And this is, again, one of those things that's better for everybody. Because from a screen reader perspective, when I land on that link, it's just gonna say, learn more. It doesn't tell me the action I'm gonna do. It's not really giving me clear understanding. And when some people use screen readers, what they'll do is they'll jump to the action points, right? So if you have 19 learn more links, all they're gonna hear is learn more, learn over and over again. But if you start putting those with descriptors on them, then those lists of links that they're trying to go through make sense. But you can also see how this would make sense for like me, because I have no idea what learn more means, see more means. You know, it's beneficial for everyone, any type, if you think of links a little more.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, back here. Yeah. So I found that I tend to usually like do it and then like, I'm gonna do it in all caps, so I will stop doing that. But here, because I found that like different generations don't always recognize the hyperlink. And so I try to be a little more specific, but is that the bad thing to do?
Yeah, I think that you should be able, it should be like an action and what they're gonna get. So it's like, click here to do this.
Oh, I see.
Or
Okay,
read
that's
here
fair.
for whatever.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it is easy to put those all caps. It makes it very visually clear, but you're kind of thinking you're catering to that one audience.
Right.
If you make sure that you're not overwriting the styles on the links, it's blue and underline, or whatever contrasting color. Blue is just the typical one, but that there is. And when you start messing with the styles of links like that, you start inherently stripping out some of the accessibility like shortcuts that regular markup will give you. Like, so example on the right, they've stripped out the color and they've stripped out the physical underline. So there's no physical difference and there's no color change. So you're kind of like, you've taken all of that out to reach some sort of aesthetic that might be helpful for somebody, but it's actually losing a lot more than it might be getting.
Yeah, and just a quick note, I feel like TJ and I are just for clarity, you know, we're speaking a lot in terms of websites, right? And in terms of functions like that. But to clarify, your email, your newsletter is a website, right? It's using the same kind of code functionality that the World Wide Web does. It's based on HTML. It's usually some form of PHP if it's a Microsoft product. So just to clarify, you know, we were mentioning websites, we're also referring to your standard anything else.
Again, this is very similar as the one before. These are buttons. We all love buttons. I always joke that I'm a designer of buttons. And here's another example. Read more resources on accessibility. When you can be descriptive of your action. It's also just generally the tone is a little more respectful because it's not like, hey, read more, buy now. You get away from that.
Yeah, it feels more focused.
All right, alt text. The bane of most organizations because who's going to write it? So alt text, if you're unsure, so if you ever hovered over an image, it might give you a little description. They're probably one of the most underutilized and misunderstood things on the internet that just inherently exist and are super easy, mainly because nobody wants to write them. Or they write them as like secret extra information that if you're savvy, you get to look. No, they're meant to describe the image. Not describe your intention of the image, not describe your marketing deal in the image, it's to describe the image. And they have to be well described. As you see, the left one is correct. Even though it looks ridiculous, it's because the photo is ridiculous. If I wrote a pug, close your eyes, and I described those two things.
That wouldn't have been much of anything anyway, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, let me just say this. Now, I do a lot of stuff with my tablet at home, YouTube and whatnot. I mean, I'm sorry I don't do the big stuff like Twitter or whatever. But very simply put, if I just said that, no one would have understood that in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is to understand these are there, and when you're working on the web, on a newsletter or whatever it is, that you take time to realize that each image needs additional copyright. But it's really easy once you get to it. It's just a nice, solid description of what you're looking at. This doesn't, for online only, this doesn't apply to things that are like decorative in nature. This is so if you have like a background that's like an image that's like like a grid of hexagons, you don't have to say a grid of hexagons. Because it's not informational, it's purely an aesthetical thing, so you don't have to worry about that.
Your logo as well is actually a decorative element, right? It doesn't necessarily need alt text.
So it's just content that is feeding information. So to your point of the table and as a picture, this is where it gets really fun.
I also want to take one quick second and just reiterate the importance of alt text. I spoke about earlier about the compliance side. This is the only time we'll try and scare you. Every single accessibility lawsuit that I've ever seen starts and ends with alternative text. Your inability to tag content, your inability to tag your heading levels, like TJ was saying, clear and unambiguous button text, clear and ambiguous language on the page. But most lawsuits, unfortunately, are usually content related to alternative text. And it's heartbreaking because it really is kind of, as TJ was saying, the easiest part, way to go about it. And it's about being descriptive. One of the most landmark accessibility lawsuits is the one where Target got sued. So sorry. And when they got sued, it was just because someone was trying to navigate their website, order a pair of jeans, right? And when they got there, it said, part number 0412, and that's not good. So someone, of course, sued them and said, I'm not getting an equitable experience. So again, alternative text is extremely important for just basic usability, for compliance measures, but also, again, going back to SEO, how do you think Google indexes images? It's by your alt text. It is not by context around the image. It's not by the file name. It is now by their algorithm. It's all done by their alternative text. So if you want your images to be featured on Google, you should make sure your alternative text is up to date.
Very much so. Fun colors. Everyone loves colors. So again, it's still the left, but it clearly tells you what the answer is anyways. But the left, there are contrast standards that you should be paying attention to on your color usage. So this is really easy. All you have to do is type in, I don't even need to give you a website, type contrast checker into Google. There's a million of them. And they all just run on a certain contrast ratio that must be met. A lot of them will give you different, they'll show you, hey, this is AA. Oh, wow, this is AAA, or this isn't. And then it'll even give you different ratings for the size of font. That might matter too on the contrast ratio. So the left contrast checker is a great one. That's the one I usually saw in the comments. So you can see on the left, these might not be the most beautiful colors to you, but they are reaching the color contrast ratio that they need. On the right side, however, we're starting to get a little, it's even like uncomfortable to look at those, right?
I'm visually impaired, so I take pictures, zoom in.
Yeah.
I even zoomed in, cannot see what's on this orange square.
There you go.
Even zoom. I'm curious, what does it say?
Oh, it says not accessible and vibrates.
Okay, I don't even see that there's anything there, but I know it's.
Wow, yeah, so there's like a good example.
And I believe that was you that mentioned, wanting to put newsletters or communication in front of your visually impaired boss and being able to make sure they can see the text on the page, right? If you do the version on the right, that's extremely inaccessible, and they might not even know it's not there, right? So how can you possibly know? So
and this is a really good example to use for people you're trying to advocate towards, because it's something that is so inherently, you can get someone who has low vision, or right, and they'll say it, but you can also just, anyone in front of those, it hurts to look at that. There's no one on the planet, the colors I picked, that someone would be like, I really print it, green like that. So I think this is a really good example to show that range, right?
So when we talk to users typically about this one, we hear the term, silent failures a lot, right? Going back to that point where they might not even know the thing was there in the first place. So avoid that at all costs. Again, your real estate is valuable in a lot of different ways.
This is a fun one that people who mind budgets on media projects lose their mind about when I tell them. But the one on the left is better. And the reason the one on the left is better, this is a video, right? So you've seen video players, you've seen YouTube players, right?
Yes.
They're embedded. A lot of times designers and people who want the cleanest experience, they really want to focus it in on it's just a video, right? Which put a big play button and we're done. Because it looks so seamless. It's like a picture, it's like Harry Potter. But you miss out so many things that are really required when dealing with media, which can be one of the most frustrating experiences, because there's so much content packed into a very nice experience, but you can't pause it. Maybe it auto plays. I have no audio description. That's a huge one that people won't even pay for. But audio description is like closed captioning, except it's for people to be described exactly what's happening. It's kind of wild if you ever want to Google it. There's a lot of Disney films that have it, but it's kind of neat to listen to as they describe it. And also a clear play and call to action. So a lot of times most video players that you'll use will have this all baked in. But when you start stripping things out by overrides and talking to your designer and be like, if it was just cleaner, there's ramifications to doing that with media. So be be very aware there's a lot of elements involved in a media player.
Yeah, and media, especially visual, motion media is a great example of universal design at its finest, right? Everyone in this room has probably used closed captions at one point in time. You're on an airplane, you're on, there's someone making noise in the kitchen, you can't hear what's on TV. So it's one of those things that's just better for everyone.
Well, my husband keeps closed captioning on TV all the time just because actors or shows are mumbling.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't hear half of the thing, and you're like, oh, when you put that on there, we're like,
British accent. My mother does that with watches MSNBC.
yeah. So.
And so this one was a really powerful slide for me, actually, when I first saw it. And this just goes to the fact that, TJ just spoke to a lot of different aspects of design, communication, and accessibility, but there's rarely one person doing that, right? So this picture on the right is obviously a bit dramatized, but think of it this way, right? You created an accessible sidewalk. You went above and beyond to make sure those tactile bumps when the person in their wheelchair reaches the end. But now they forgot to talk to the city planner, and there's a grate there. That's a catastrophic accessibility failure. So this slide, I really like showing just because it dramatically kind of shows the need to talk to everyone. This is not a one-person job. Just because you are the director, the VP, the CEO of marketing communications, there's still a whole team of people that you need to coordinate with. Otherwise, where your job ends, it might be completely inaccessible after that. So teamwork is absolutely essential. And again, just to bring it all kind of home, we talked, TJ obviously did a great job of talking about how content's important, that it's not something that can kind of be given the wayside. But these are two actually great examples that from TJ's and I old agency of how you can make your content and your beautiful visual media work for you, right? How often do you go on websites and there's a big, beautiful image, but the text on front of it is white? You can't really read what that text was. So I love this case study as just an example of you can have your beautiful imagery, right? Your imagery is important. It gives you look and feel and mood of the page. And also you can separate your text and make it feel like it's intentional and purposefully placed in how it is. And there's nothing complicated about what we've done here, right? Instead of just putting a full gradient on that image up top, we just did a beautiful semicircle to hold the text we needed to so that the rest of the image could shine through. And the bottom is as simply as putting the focus of the image on the right so that the text can move left. Conversation.
Sorry, I don't know. So now we want to talk about being our harshest critic. So I gave you an example of mine. We're working right now at the Post that we're trying to get the app images to not be the images that are ported in from our site. That is a thing that we're aware of. So I was wondering, are there things after hearing this talk, do you want to call something out? Do you want to, or something you've seen, or some, ideally for your own self, so you can talk about it a little bit more. But anyone have anything that jumps to mind after reading this that you want to go back and tackle?
In the terms of education, right? Tell us about the things you might not be doing great at right now. We can maybe talk about ways we can
Or do better.
I think images on social media.
Yeah.
And having the description. I see other places or people that I follow that are doing a really good job of that. And just wanting to learn how to do that better. And I feel like different on different platforms. And so any advice that you have on that, very helpful.
Well, you're kind of locked in on social media platforms of what they're offering. They've been being hammered for more accessible options. You see this a lot on TikTok with auto captioning, which was rolled out like a year ago. And then Twitter, I can't remember when they did this, but Twitter has alt text. That was a while ago. But there are there. You just kind of have to your point, know the tool you're using. And also plan that time into your cycle, right? I wrote 10 tweets. They're going out for the next 10 days. You also have to plan that you have to write that alt text for this and things. And frankly, that's just a spreadsheet. It's another column in a spreadsheet. I used to write stuff like that, and it's just another column where you say alt text and just make sure it's all filled out. And since it's less, you're already writing your content, it's not a brain dump to do, right? You picked your image, you did all that thinking, now you just have to describe the image. So it should just be a matter of a very locked amount of time. So being ready with that and also using services to their full advantage.
And one quick, also, I don't think I mentioned this previously, just before I forget, there's an idea also that your alt text doesn't just need to be describing what is on the image, right? You can work your brand into your alt text, right? So imagine you're a legal website and you have a group of people laughing around a water cooler with a mugs in their hand, right? It can either be, just that, 4 colleagues sharing a cup of coffee around a water cooler, or it can be, 2 males, 2 females enjoying a cup of coffee after winning a law case, right? Because we are Spector and Gioconda law, and we love our clients, and obviously not that dramatic. But feel free to, be a little creative with your alt text. There's no rule, there's no compliance rule that says it has to be very strict and robotic and boring, right? If anything, this is another opportunity, more, wasted real estate if you're not building your brand into your alternative text, which again, inevitably gets crawled by Google. Someone with disabilities will see that, pardon my language, will be able to comprehend that and realize your brand loyalty and your brand presence, and they'll come to you more than will your competitors, because it's a more enjoyable experience, right? Outside of compliance, outside of empathy, enjoyment is a really big, quality metric that we talk about when we do usability testing.
I was going to say, I know, like, for some of my responsibilities at your social media and platforms like Hootsuite and Meta Business Suite have the availability to add alt text and add accessibility features. There's no real guidelines to give you sort of no direction, and this is also sort of what I studied in school, but naturally, as someone who tends to be wordy when they write, I'm generally inclined to keep the alt text shorter. So hearing that, using that description, using that as space to include keywords and SEO boosting is really interesting and not something that I was taught or that I've heard of before. So I know that now I can go back and moving forward, I can make those changes in alt text.
Yeah. I trained long period of time under Bob Levy back in the 70s, 80s. He was a advisor when I was going to journalism. And I, until today, totally misunderstood alt text. I thought it was like literally kind of describe what's there. What I was taught is that a caption under a photo should not describe what's there. That a caption should be its own little story and reference the picture, but give the reader information that they're not going to get just by looking at the picture.
Yeah.
And I have always taken the caption and abbreviated it, turned it into an alt text. And I didn't realize, I knew what it was for, but now I know they're really two separate things. Like all the stuff you're not going to get to make the photo caption appealing to that world, but how to twist that and kind of, So that was really important.
They can be the same thing. I would say that a caption can be an alt text, but an alt text cannot be a caption.
Exactly, yes.
Or,
but it's a whole new way, but like if you go into it knowing that this is the square rectangle thing, all of none, you can make your job actually streamlined.
Yeah, very much so.
Just a general question. I was curious because and this might be a little too specific, but a lot of your earlier slides were like paragraphs. I was wondering if there was any accessibility issues with justification. Like sometimes full justification, the spacing changes, and does that create issues, or is that plus minuses?
Definitely plus minuses. So oddly enough, remember, if you remember back to my second slide was where I showed the different levels of conformance, right? Single A, double A, and triple A. Yes. So in triple A compliance, there's actually a rule that says it has to have no justification. So left to right span, the spacing will look a little funky, but that's actually a preferred method. And that's actually candidly been something I struggle with, because I do not have that, I don't have a cognitive or visual impairment that would cause me to require text to look that way. Yeah. So to me, it doesn't totally look right, but it is a rule, and there's a lot of usability testing that goes in saying that, lack of justification is actually the correct way to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And a lot of advertising kind of does things that way, and I find that visually pleasing, but I can see it being an issue on the other hand.
But I mean, and so this is where it gets a little tricky, right? And this is where I'm going to go back on a lot of what I just said. So bear with me, don't hold it against me. You as content marketers or creators or digital people of any kind have an obligation to serve your entire audience, right? And users with disability is one small subsection of your audience, right? Of course, you want to make things as easy and purpose-driven for them as you possibly can. At the same time, you do have 95% of your other audience to also worry about, right? So how do you do that on the seesaw, right? Because again, in my very specific preference, I would prefer left justification, which candidly I think would probably be the preference of most of the web. However, in order to cater to again a more users with that more severe disability on the side of the spectrum, would prefer no justification. So at that point, it kind of is a judgment call on your side, right?
Yeah.
Establish your audience, analyze them, use data to inform the decision, and don't just say, well, AAA compliance says you should have no justification. It's a hard equation to balance, right? Of course, you want to be as inclusive as possible, but you also can't alienate the other 95% of your audience. So it's tough. It's something we all battle.
On the topic of accessibility, I recently came across, and I didn't know about that, there's a worldwide web consortium that has developed standards. Are those standards widely adopted or?
Yeah, so WCAG is actually a product of W3C, which is the Worldwide Web Consortium. They're the ones who wrote WCAG. So they wrote the book on accessibility.
Stacy asked if you could repeat that question, because you couldn't hear quite.
Oh, sure. The question was just, does the World Wide Web Consortium have anything to do with digital accessibility? And the answer was just that, yes, they're the ones who developed the WCAG web criteria for accessibility. Yeah.
For someone who is to use like a text magnifying software, again, I shared with my dad's visually impaired, so I sort of grew up watching him do that. How would you recommend going about creating sort of, what I've noticed with him is that he has trouble, he has it magnified, and this is very personal, but it's just my frame of reference. He sort of has it so justified that it almost blends together when he scrolls past an image that has contrasting colors in the background. So if you were to scroll past a button that has white text and blue background, looking for black on white text, oftentimes he just misses it. Is there a way to sort of combat that, or sort of like, if that makes, I don't know if that makes sense, but sort of reducing that, like making everything equally as useful for someone with visual impairment?
It's a great question.
So you're asking if you're zooming in on things, how do you create? So I think that's where making sure that you have correct headlines, you have correct size minimums, right? So oftentimes people like to make like a 10-point font, little titles, right? So there's a general rule of when you're creating something to have things be 16 font or above, unless they're being like labels, and then you can do like, these are very rules of thumb, by the way. These aren't like intense, this will solve your problem. And then also the zoom thing is a huge thing. Once you get whatever product you have, zoom in on it. Just press, I think it's like Control plus on a Mac, or whatever the option on Macs. Command plus, and zoom it in. Zoom it in like a couple times and see how it distorts. This is, when you start doing this though, you start talking about edge cases. So it's really like you have to figure out where does that end, because you could go so extreme that you're spending a bunch of time there. But this is where Scott's right. Know your audience, know who you're serving, embrace universal design, and if it can be purpose driven and you know you have a certain audience, be purpose driven and put that within your user like mental model, right? Like our user's name is Jimmy and he has these issues. Whatever you need to create a culture that looks out for the people you know you're serving, and then create some design standards that you do each time to really make sure that something's happening. And if you get a complaint, revamp that QA process. Revamp like, okay, maybe we should start checking contrast more. We've got a couple complaints about that. And that's where you hear a lot of designers talk about process and then trying to keep consistent each and every time so that you have quality of product each time.
I think I saw someone on chat maybe ask the question, can we explain simple language a bit more and how that relates to more accessible content?
Oh, I love this. Go for it. So there's literally a federal department. Do you remember their name? Okay, there's literally it's called Plain Language. It's like the Plain Language Act, right? And it created this department that has a lot of resources. I think it's called the Plain Language type federal government. It'll come up. Anyways, they make a lot of rules on like how you're supposed to be able to talk. And so simple language is essentially like embracing the idea that most vocab, when you make it simpler, is easier. So I like to explain this really bluntly, that you should always consider your first draft of anything to be shit. And you should look back on it and take a look at it. And when you see words that are long, you need to really be self-critical of yourself and really think of like a general audience. And that means taking out, this goes to the abbreviations, this goes to long insider baseball language, this even just goes to long words. Can you use a simpler word? And this isn't necessarily because I can't understand the word, but it takes more, we say cognitive load a lot of times. Like if I want to say the word good and you're using the word exponentially amazing, you're being very verbose. It takes me longer to understand what you're talking about, and it's like not really adding value. And you see this kind of get, where this fight really emerges in an organization is between people who are advocates of this and a marketer who's trying to like wow people with like some great language. So you have to find out where that line is. But typically when you are not marketing, it's not the big H1 and it's just functional language, you got to cut with the large language, the large verbose language, and really make it as simple as possible. And if you're doing it right, your first draft will get shorter and shorter and shorter until you boil it down and you're like, I can't make it any shorter.
Again, remember in the concept, people are to surf your content, they don't want to take the SATs on your website.
Yeah, no one wants to read your book.
Yeah. Even Apple, Microsoft doesn't.
And usually come in play when manufacturers develop user manuals.
Yeah.
There's guides, standards for what is in language.
Right.
Yeah.
They usually target at about 10 to 11th grade level.
If you ever want to read a great case study on instructions, go read up on how Lego did it. Their instructions are insanely accessible, and they have been for a while. From what they started versus where they are now, it is wildly impressive how they kind of transform themselves.
It's still difficult to build the battleship.
Right, exactly. 6 years later. Yeah. So we don't actually have any more. We have a couple more slides we could go through, but we got only about 5 minutes left, I believe. So we kind of already been doing it, but open floor, any general questions?
I have a question. Oh,
You can go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Julie. When we upload pictures to our website, it asks for 4 different things: title, description, alt text, and caption. And we were advised at one point to fill in title, description, and alt text. But I'm not really clear on what the title and description, where that's going or how that's useful, and whether that should be different than the alt text. I know you discussed the caption piece, but I wasn't sure about the title and description piece.
So knowing your website a little bit, I'm going to speak a little biased, but so the title part makes it easily findable when you need to go get it again. So you upload an image on your website, most of the time you need to find it again somewhere else, right? So you upload it and then lands in what they call like a media browser, right? If you're on something like WordPress or Squarespace, that's what's called your media browser. So that's why the title is important, right? Otherwise, it could come in with a title like abc.xyz. Whatever. So it's important just for refindability, and so that when you see it at a glance, you can say that's what this image is. Description, honestly, I'm not sure.
If you're using WordPress, I'm pretty sure all of that is just meta information within your media library.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the alt text is actually going live and it's published.
So that's the only external piece that we really have to worry about. The rest is for our own benefit.
Grain of salt, but that's what I think. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Google might go looking for it, but I don't think they rank that stuff anymore. Again, it is focused primarily on alt text.
Great.
And yes, you will be getting a copy of this presentation.
I was going to comment with simple language, I was thinking about literacy rates, just pushing the disability community and that kind of stuff, how it really makes it's really helpful to use the simple language as possible.
Well, I don't know if this is still true, but I think they say that like most of America reads it like a so that's something to keep in mind.
I took a few, I'm a recent college grad, but I took a lot of Web 3.0 based classes in SEO, HTML stuff, and I was always told that you have to write as if you're writing on like an 8th grade level, because that not only is still low enough where people who aren't on the literacy can understand it, but it's also people who are above that literacy won't feel as if you're talking down to them. So it's like hitting that sweet spot, and it's really difficult as someone who writes most of what I do is writing based. Finding that middle ground is really difficult sometimes, but it's important.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good, I mean, that's my philosophy of accessible design. Like you're not designing down to somebody, you're designing for everyone. And I think if anything, that mentality is culturally important, to respect the people that you're working with. And it's also to keep it grounded. Like oftentimes I've been in accessible groups where we're really focused on the blind or the physically disabled, and like and that's good if you can be purposely designed like that way and you know that's the audience, that's one thing. If you're designing for a general audience, that can be very defeating, and then also again, like designing down for people is disrespectful and not really the energy you want in your accessibility group.
So that said, the one caveat I will say, right, is that, for example, I right now work at a massive engineering company, right? So a lot of language on our website is very intentionally inside baseball, right? It is very engineering oriented, very abbreviation driven, and there's a lot of big words. But that's very purposeful. We are very much focusing on a singular audience because that audience makes us more money than the next 5 combined, right? As far as SEO goes, as far as general on-page content ads goes. So again, know your audience. My case is very extreme. I'm sure most people in this room isn't. But you know, don't take what we say here as the rules for all, right? The point is to adapt it universally to what you do, and to probably make it at some point a little less universal, right? That's how you find your niche. That's how businesses grow and expand and find new user bases, right? So, so again, everything we're saying is, you know, kind of your foundation, but make sure you obviously make it your own. Otherwise, it's kind of
it's a fun fact. I think I read the New Yorker. And you read that, like reads at like a 12th grade level or something. And so if you ever read it, it becomes very apparent when you start reading it. But they know their audience and they're catering to that audience of a specific type of people.
I don't want to know what the baseline is anymore for these grades, because it's certainly not how it was when I grew up. So I wonder if that has changed at all through the years, what that level actually is.
Right. I just learned how to carry the 1 in math.
Yeah, it's very humbling when you see your kids working.
Yeah.
One of you all had commented that you really liked your slide with woman in the wheelchair at the grate.
Yeah.
The University of Maryland, there's actually a very well-designed, because they fixed it, it was not a curb cutaway, and they finally put a curb cutaway outside of the building where I went. When I got out, I crossed the street, there was not one on the way. And when I looked at that and I saw the grate, it's like, sometimes you have to look at the other side of the street, where am I going once I get off, and then I had to back into traffic to get back.
Exactly.
It is interesting, I love that slide also.
Yeah, it's a good example that if you go back, oftentimes in groups, what they'll do is they'll create accessible task forces, or like groups of people who advocate. And that's important to what Scott was saying, is that involve people. It's not just the design group that's in our accessible thing, it's the whole canon. And you should work, and you should probably not have problems doing this other than reaching out to those people. But everyone who's managing that project should be, there should be a representative, because they'll bring it back. So you don't have to be scrambling around, you don't have to be the czar of accessibility, but you have to have like a focus point that your different groups, whether you have engineers on your team, whether you have marketers or designers, or whatever your mix looks like. Make sure it's a mix. You make the other ramp on the other side.
Let me out of a building.
Yeah. We've done our job.
Exactly. And I kind of laughed about it, but it was rather amusing. That was almost 20 years ago. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that they finally built the ramp on that.
Well,
On the other side.
Huzzah. I just want to speak, Mike, are there any last questions? I know we're coming up on time. Anyone? Oh, sorry,
I don't have anything else to say. I've said what I wanted.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would just like to represent Main Street by saying how grateful we are for your time and your expertise and coming and sharing this with us. I know this deck is going to be well used by a lot of people, so thank you. Stacey, are you there? Do you want to say anything?
I'm here, but I really can't talk. I love you guys.
All right, so we will share this deck if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, I'll send it over to you.
And thank you for everything. We're so excited. And thank you all for coming. And we really appreciate taking the time out of your day to come and be a part of this learning opportunity, and hopefully you'll come back for more. We've got a gratitude, I'm gonna plug a few things. We've got a gratitude happy hour next Thursday here. It starts